My boyfriend's family tried to pretend to be poor to see if I was the one who only wanted money. They were trying to get me to leave him, but they didn't know who I really was. So I decided to play along with them, pretending to be completely broke too, and see what they would do next. Let me start at the beginning. I had been with Julian for around 8 months when he finally asked if I'd like to meet his family for their usual Sunday dinner. On the drive over, he seemed way more tense than usual. Normally, he's this confident, put-together guy, but that day he kept fidgeting with the steering wheel, like he was preparing for something big. "Just so you know, my family is pretty simple," he said, glancing at me like he was worried I'd judge them. "We don't have a lot, but we share what we have." I squeezed his hand and told him that none of that mattered to me, and I meant it. What I didn't mention is that I already knew everything about his family. LinkedIn truly is a gift. His dad, Thomas, owns not one, but 3 luxury car dealerships across the state. His mom, Evelyn, sits on the board of 2 major corporations. His sister, Natalie, she's a partner at a top-tier law firm downtown. And the address he originally gave me was in Greenwich Hills, where houses start at $1.9 million and go up from there. So when we pulled up to this little rundown ranch house in a completely different neighborhood, with peeling paint and a lawn that hadn't seen a mower in weeks, it didn't take a genius to understand what was going on. They weren't just introducing me to the family, they were testing me. Julian parked beside an ancient-looking sedan that probably hadn't run in years, and I noticed the garage door was shut tight, most likely hiding their real cars. He cleared his throat and murmured, "This is it." I smiled like I believed it and said it looked cozy. Then I followed him inside. His mom answered the door wearing faded jeans and a worn-out sweatshirt, her hair pulled back into a simple ponytail. She gave me this hug that felt rehearsed, warm on the surface, but checking for weaknesses underneath. "You must be Maya," she said. "Come in, sweetheart. Sorry about the mess." Inside, everything looked staged. There was mismatched furniture that looked like it came from a clearance aisle, generic art that had no personality, and a TV so old it probably weighed more than I do. But the slip-ups were easy to spot: a Hermes scarf tossed casually over a chair, a Montblanc pen sitting on the coffee table, the subtle tan line on Thomas's wrist where a Rolex usually sits. I complimented the place. Evelyn smiled politely and told me they'd lived there 20 years and the house had good bones, though it needed some work. Sure. Dinner was served on chipped plates with silverware that was literally bent. I watched Natalie, the high-powered attorney, try to hold a neutral expression while using a fork that looked like it had been run over by a truck. Meanwhile, Julian's younger brother, Evan, kept staring at me like he was waiting for me to cringe and leave. Thomas asked me what I did for work. I told him, very casually, that I was between jobs at the moment. Which wasn't exactly false, considering I'd just sold my marketing firm for 8 figures and was now taking a break from working altogether. "Tough economy," Thomas said with sympathy in his voice. "What field were you in?" I kept my tone vague and said, "Oh, digital marketing. Just some freelance work here and there." Then Evelyn leaned in and asked if I'd finished college. I told her I did a couple years but had to drop out because of money problems. Total lie, I actually have a degree from one of the top business schools in the country. But I wanted to see where they were headed with this. The family shared quick little looks, like they were silently confirming something about me. Evan asked if I was still paying off student loans. I nodded, and Evelyn gave Julian this sad, motherly sigh as if I were some charity case. "That must be really hard," she said, with this tone that was supposed to sound understanding, but it just came across as condescending. All throughout dinner, they sprinkled in very dramatic mentions of how tight money was. Thomas mentioned how expensive car repairs had become, which was funny since I'd just seen a LinkedIn article about him expanding his dealership network. Evelyn talked about clipping coupons, despite the Cartier bracelet she wears in her company profile photo. And Natalie complained about student loans she supposedly still had, even though she graduated 15 years ago and makes more than enough to buy a small island. It was honestly an impressive performance. Slightly insulting, but impressive. After dinner, Julian went into the kitchen to help his mom, and Thomas asked if I wanted to get some air outside. I followed him onto a deck that looked like it hadn't been treated since the early 2000s. He leaned against the railing and gave me that serious father talk. "Julian really cares about you," he said. "We just want to make sure you care about him for the right reasons." I pretended not to understand at first and asked him to explain. He said they weren't a wealthy family, and if I was expecting financial benefits, I was in the wrong place. I looked him right in the eyes and told him I was with Julian because I loved him, not his hypothetical bank account. That seemed to satisfy him, so he went back inside. I stayed out a minute, pulled out my phone, and texted my assistant. I need documents showing I'm financially struggling. Student loans, credit card debt, the whole thing. Make it convincing. She replied instantly, on it. When I came back inside, Evelyn gently pulled me aside, holding my hands like she was about to deliver tragic news. She said Julian had big dreams, starting his own business, buying a house, building a future. And she wanted to be sure I could support those dreams. I told her I understood completely and that I was doing everything I could to get stable financially, but it may take time. Her expression shifted into soft, almost patronizing pity. Then she asked me quietly. Have you thought about what your future with him would look like, if things become serious? When Evelyn asked me, how would you contribute to a household? I told her I'd figure it out. I explained that Julian and I were a team, and that we'd work through whatever came our way. She nodded, but I could tell by her eyes she didn't buy a word of it. When we left their house that night, Julian apologized. He said his family can be a bit intense sometimes. They just worry, he told me. Money's always been tight for us, so they get protective. They don't want me ending up in a tough situation. I kissed his cheek, told him I understood, and asked if he wanted to stay at my place. He said yes. The moment we walked into my little one-bedroom apartment in a regular middle-class neighborhood, I could see the tension roll right off him. He had no idea that I also owned a penthouse downtown and a beach house in Malibu. The apartment was simply the version of me I wanted people to see, nothing fancy, nothing suspicious, just normal. Over the next 2 weeks, his family really committed to their act. They leaned into the whole, we're just a humble, struggling family thing while also digging into my background like detectives. Evan added me on social media and I literally saw him screenshotting my posts, the thrift store outfits, the cheap groceries, all of it. Natalie asked me to lunch and spent the whole time talking about how expensive the world is and how she wished she could afford anything nicer.
It was exhausting, but I played along. I showed up to family dinners in Target clothes, drove my old backup car, and told stories about my landlord raising rent and picking up extra freelance jobs to get by. They traded little looks with each other like they were very proud of themselves, like they thought they were finally testing me properly. Then Julian's birthday came. They threw a small get-together at that ranch house, and I brought a gift I'd spent time choosing. A first-edition book he'd once mentioned loving. The real price? $9,800 at an auction. I had it rebound in a cheap cover and told him I found it in a used bookstore for $20. He lit up. His family looked at the gift like it physically offended them. That's when Evelyn pulled me aside. "My honey, can we talk?" She led me into the kitchen where Natalie and Thomas were already waiting, all three wearing serious faces. I knew this was the real conversation. Thomas began by telling me they had grown very fond of me. Evelyn added that I made Julian happy. And then Natalie skipped the niceties altogether and went straight to the point. "We're concerned about the financial side of your relationship." I acted confused. Asked her what she meant. She explained that they could see I was struggling financially, which was understandable, but they didn't want Julian's future dragged down by someone who couldn't contribute equally. Thomas chimed in, saying Julian had worked hard and they didn't want him to end up supporting someone long-term. They paused, waiting for this to land. Evelyn softened her tone. "We're not saying you're a bad person. We know you care for him. But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you have to think practically." I asked them straight out if they were telling me to break up with him. They exchanged glances. "We're asking you to think about what's best for him," Natalie said carefully. "Is it fair to let him build a life with someone who might become a financial burden?" My jaw tightened, but my voice stayed calm. I said Julian and I were adults and could handle our own relationship. Thomas sighed and shook his head. "We hoped you'd be reasonable. So we're prepared to make this easier for you." He took out an envelope and placed it on the counter. "There's $7,500 in there. Take it, tell Julian you're moving for a job somewhere else and let him move on." I looked at the envelope. Then at their faces. Evelyn looked like she actually felt bad. Natalie looked like she'd done this before. Thomas looked proud of himself. I picked up the envelope, opened it and flipped through the cash. Then I started laughing. At first it was just a small laugh, then I couldn't stop, and they had no idea what to do with that. Natalie's voice sharpened. "Is something funny?" I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Turned the screen toward them. The number on my checking account alone was $1,060,000. "You want to pay me $5,000 to leave him?" I asked. I spent more than that on his birthday present. That used book? First edition. Authenticated. Bought at Sotheby's. Evelyn's face went white. Thomas leaned in to read the screen. Natalie's jaw literally dropped. Then I opened my real LinkedIn, the one I'd hidden. Founder and former CEO of Catalyst Digital Marketing. Sold the company for $6.8 million. Board member for 3 Fortune 500 companies. Net worth somewhere around $15 million depending on the market. Their expressions shifted from confusion, realization, embarrassment. Then I pulled up the photos I'd saved, screenshots of Thomas's car dealerships, Evelyn's board memberships, Natalie's law firm partnership, their real house in Greenwich Hills, the Tesla in the driveway. Did you think I didn't know who you were? I asked. I looked into your family the day after Julian and I met. I knew you were testing me the second we pulled up to this rental house. Evelyn actually gasped. Thomas stammered. How did you know this place was rented? Property records are public, I said. This house has been rented month to month through a management company. About 6 weeks now. Which lines up perfectly with when Julian told you he'd met someone. Then I turned to Evelyn. And the Hermes scarf was a nice touch, by the way. I looked at Evelyn and said, you almost pulled off the whole struggling mom vibe. Almost. But you couldn't quite hide all the designer pieces. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't have to. Natalie was the first one to recover, probably because she's a lawyer and used to bluffing her way out of awkward moments. So if you knew we were testing you, she asked, why did you go along with it? I gave her a smile that didn't have even a hint of warmth behind it. Because I wanted to see how far you'd take it. I wanted to know if you'd actually try to pay me off to leave your son. And you did. So now I know exactly the kind of people you are. I took out my phone and snapped a picture of the cash in the envelope on the counter. That's proof, by the way, I said. Offering money to break up a relationship can count as coercion, depending on how someone argues it in court. I let that sink in for a second. But don't worry, I don't want your money. And I don't want to sue you. I'm just interested in watching you explain all of this to Julian. And right then, almost like the universe had perfect comedic timing, Julian walked into the kitchen. He saw the cash first. Then his family's faces. Then mine. What's going on? He asked slowly. I looked right at him. Your family just offered me $5,000 to break up with you because they think I'm a gold digger. His face drained of color. What? Mom? Evelyn tried to get a sentence out, but I didn't let her. They've been testing me from the start. Though we're just a humble family, act, the rental house, the thrift store clothes, all of it. And when I didn't run off, they switched the script and decided I was too poor. So they tried to pay me to leave. I held up my phone, still showing the banking app. For the record, I make more in interest every month than what they offered me. Julian looked from the screen to his parents to me. You're rich? He asked, sounding like he was trying to catch up with reality. I shrugged. I sold my company last year. I wanted a break to figure out what's next. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to know me for me, not for my bank account. I glanced at his family. Apparently we had the same idea. Just different execution. Thomas stepped forward, hands up. Julian, we were just trying to protect you. Julian stopped him with a sharp gesture. You pretended to be poor? You rented a house and bought cheap furniture just to test my girlfriend. Evan appeared in the doorway, eyes big. Clearly he'd caught enough to get the picture. And when she passed your test, Julian said, voice rising, when she proved she didn't care about money, you tried to pay her to leave because she didn't have enough of it? Natalie jumped back in. We were thinking about your future. You deserve someone who can be an equal financial partner. Julian laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that comes right before something breaks. Equal partner? You mean like when you married Dad right out of law school while he was the one making everything work? Should he have paid you to leave because you didn't have money yet? Natalie turned red. Then he faced Evelyn. And Mom, didn't Grandma try to break you and Dad up because he came from a working-class family? Didn't you run away and elope because she judged him for not coming from money? This time, Evelyn didn't have a defense. Her tears were real. Julian grabbed my hand. We're done here. Don't call me. We walked out together. Down the driveway. Around the corner. To where my actual car was parked, the Mercedes G-Wagon. He stared at it. This is yours. I nodded. I've got a few cars. This one's just my favorite. We drove in silence for a while, the kind of silence where your mind is trying to rearrange reality into something that makes sense. Finally, he said softly, I'm so sorry. I never would have let them do any of that. I squeezed his hand. I know. If I thought you were a part of it, I would have left the first night. Another pause. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. About your money? I pulled into a parking lot like I needed the car to stop before I could answer. For the same reason your family hid theirs. I wanted to know you loved me for who I am, not for what I can offer. I've dated enough people who were more interested in my portfolio than my personality. He nodded slowly, still working it all out. That makes sense, but you could have told me once you knew I wasn't like that. I smiled. I was actually planning to tell you this weekend. take you to my real place, introduce you to my real life. Your family just rushed the schedule a bit. He leaned back and exhaled. My family is really rich. Like really rich. And they fake being broke to test you. This is insane. I laughed. Not gonna lie, it's definitely creative. Most families just ask a few questions over dinner or quietly check your social media. But his family? They went full performance mode. It felt like they were acting out some kind of test. After we left, Julian asked where we were going. I told him I was taking him to my penthouse downtown. You have a penthouse? He asked, and I could hear the disbelief in his voice. I told him yeah, I had the penthouse, a place by the beach, and the apartment he'd been staying in. I kept that apartment because sometimes I like to live a normal, quiet life. I told him the apartment was real, it just wasn't my only home. He got quiet in the elevator on the way up. The penthouse takes up the whole top floor, and when we walked inside he stopped right at the entrance. He was staring at the huge windows and the full view of the city below. This is really your place? He asked. I kicked my shoes off and told him it was. I bought it a few years ago as an investment, but it ended up being the place I liked the most. The light in there is something else. He looked at me with this expression I couldn't read. Is this strange for you? He asked. Watching me try to take all of this in? I told him no. I always knew I'd explain everything sooner or later. I just hoped it would happen on my terms, not because his family forced it. We sat on the couch and I showed him my actual life. Boardroom photos, the announcement when I sold my company, articles about my work. You're kind of known, he said, scrolling through search results. In business circles, I told him. I've just been trying to keep things quiet while I figure out what I want to do next. I got tired of always being the CEO version of myself. He put my phone down and looked at me. I love you, he said. The version I met and the version I'm learning about. I just wish my family didn't ruin how I found out. I told him they didn't ruin anything. If anything, they gave me clarity. He stood up for me when he thought I had nothing. That told me what I needed to know about him. He pulled me closer. They're going to call, he said. A lot. They're going to apologize and try to justify all of it. I told him he could handle that however he wanted. I wasn't going to tell him how to deal with his family. But I did say that if they truly wanted to fix things, they needed to ask themselves why they thought testing someone was okay in the first place. Over the next few days his phone barely stopped buzzing. He ignored most of it, but eventually he read me some of the messages. Evelyn wrote a long apology. She said she was scared of Julian getting hurt and let that fear turn her into someone she didn't recognize. Thomas sent a short message saying they crossed a line and wanted to make it right. Natalie apologized too, saying seeing Julian defend me reminded her of how Thomas used to defend Evelyn years ago, and realizing how far they had drifted made her feel ashamed. Evan just wrote, your girlfriend is badass. I'm sorry we suck. That one made Julian laugh. A week later he agreed to meet his parents. I offered to go, but he said he needed to do it alone. He was gone for about 3 hours. When he came back he looked tired but lighter. They're going to therapy, he said, dropping onto the couch. All of them. Family therapy. Trust issues. Control issues. Everything. I asked how he felt. He said it was a start. He told me they admitted that money had made them paranoid. They were afraid people only loved Julian for the lifestyle. So they tried to create a situation where they had nothing to see who stayed. But when I stayed anyway they didn't know how to process it. His mom said something like, when you're rich, you wonder if anyone would love you if everything disappeared. So they tried to create that scenario. I pointed out that if I were after money, I would have researched them first and acted like I didn't care about wealth. Their test only worked on amateurs. Julian laughed. You kind of did research and played a role, he said. I admitted he wasn't wrong, but my reason wasn't money. I wanted to understand them, not take anything from them. About 2 weeks later, Evelyn called me directly. I almost didn't answer, but I was curious. She asked if I'd meet her for coffee. Just as that I agreed to meet her, mostly because I needed to know whether the apology was real or just another layer of manipulation. We chose a quiet cafe downtown. When Evelyn walked in, I noticed right away she wasn't wearing the struggling mom costume anymore. She looked like herself, elegant, well put together, expensive but subtle. No performance this time. Thank you for meeting me, she said as she sat down. I honestly didn't know if you would. I told her I was curious about what she wanted to say. She took a deep breath. I'm not going to defend what we did. It was manipulative. It was cruel. And we hurt you and we hurt Julian. Her voice was steady but there was weight behind it. She explained how over the years, people had tried to get close to their family because of money. How it made them suspicious. How it made them controlling. How they eventually stopped seeing individual people and instead saw threats everywhere. She said therapy had already started helping them recognize the problem, but that it would take time to break the habits. I'm not asking you to forgive us, she said. I'm asking for the chance to start over. To actually get to know you. Without testing you. Without assuming the worst. I let that sit for a moment and then I asked her the real question. If I had actually been broke, if I really had been living paycheck to paycheck, Would we be having this conversation right now? Or would you still think you were right to try to push me out of Julian's life? Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She didn't try to dodge it either. She actually thought before speaking. Finally, she said quietly, I want to say yes, but I don't know. And that's the part I'm working on. I've tied people's worth to financial stability for so long that I don't realize when I'm doing it. My mother-in-law did the same thing to me. She looked at my background and decided I wasn't good enough, and I swore I'd never be like her. But I became her. Just with more money to hide behind. Her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time they felt real. I told her I appreciated her honesty. And that if we were going to try again, she needed to understand that I wasn't going to tone myself down or pretend to be someone else. This is who I am, I told her. Money included. Evelyn nodded and said she understood. We talked for a long time after that. She told me about when she and Thomas first got married, when money was tight and they were building the business brick by brick. We ate ramen for dinner more nights than I can count, she said. I rotated the same 3 outfits to work for years. But I was happy because we were building something together. Then the money came and everything changed. Relatives wanted loans. Friends expected them to pay for everything. Strangers approached them with business pitches. Everyone had an angle. I told her I understood how that could make someone protect themselves, but testing and lying to people was not protection. The real solution was boundaries, honesty, and trust. She agreed. Over the next few months, the relationship with Julian's family improved. Slowly but genuinely. We were invited to dinner at their real home in Greenwich Hills. The difference from the rental house was almost unbelievable. Huge rooms, collected art, furniture that belonged in magazines, not on discount warehouse floors. Natalie apologized privately. She admitted she had pushed the hardest for the test. I was projecting, she said. I once married someone partly for financial stability. And when that fell apart, I convinced myself that anyone who cared about money was shallow. But the truth is, I was the one treating relationships like transactions. Evan told me he'd learned something too. I was already starting to be suspicious of everyone I dated. Watching how wrong they were about you, it woke me up. I don't want to live like that. Thomas pulled me aside during dessert. Julian told us about your company, he said. About what you built. I respect that. We should have taken the time to actually get to know you. We would have seen someone driven, intelligent, successful, and we would have been proud of Julian, not threatened. I told him I appreciated him saying that. I won't hold the test against you forever, I said. But I won't forget it happened. It showed me who you become when you're scared. Thomas nodded. That's fair. We're trying to change that. And over time, the dinners, the conversations, the effort, it showed. Family gatherings became comfortable. Evelyn eventually invited me to join her book club, not the stereotypical kind where everyone pretends to read and gossips for 2 hours. These women actually read and wanted to talk about ideas. It felt surprisingly normal. About 6 months after the birthday incident, Julian and I were having dinner in the penthouse when he suddenly got very serious. I've been thinking about the future, he said. Our future. I set my fork down and gave him my full attention. He told me that seeing everything unfold with his family made him realize how much he trusted me. You could have destroyed them, he said. You had evidence. You could have burned everything to the ground. But you didn't. You gave them a chance to learn. I told him the truth. I didn't spare them for them. I did it for him. They were his family. I didn't want to be the reason he lost them. He reached across the table and took my hand. I know it might feel early and we're young and we've only been together a year, but I need you to know that I want my life to be with you. My heart started pounding. Then he smiled and said, I'm not proposing right now. I know we need more time. I just want you to know where my heart is. I squeezed his hand and told him I felt the same way. Your family's test ended up being a blessing, I said. I got to watch you choose me when it mattered. That told me everything I needed to know. We spent the rest of the night talking about what we wanted our lives to look like. He was working on launching his business. I was consulting for startups and mapping out my next big project. We wanted independence, but also to build something together. A year and a half after the test, Julian did propose. At sunset at the Malibu beach house. No audience, no spectacle. Just us, the ocean, and a ring he designed himself. When we shared the news, his family was genuinely happy. Evelyn cried, the real, proud kind. Thomas hugged me and officially welcomed me in. Natalie joked that I was stuck with him now, and Evan asked if he could bring a +1 to the wedding. Planning the wedding ended up being easier than I expected. Evelyn offered to help, but made it clear she would step back if I preferred. Turns out, I actually liked planning it with her. We bonded over cake tastings, florists, venue tours. One day while we were looking at venues, Evelyn said, I'm grateful you gave us another chance. Most people wouldn't have. I told her that while I didn't approve of their methods, I understood where the fear came from. Fear of being used. Fear of being blindsided. Fear of loving the wrong person. But fear doesn't excuse behavior, I added. It just explains it. She squeezed my hand and told me I was going to be a good addition to their family. The wedding was beautiful, held at a vineyard that landed somewhere between private and breathtaking. Both of our families were there. Watching them interact felt surreal in the best way. During the reception, Thomas gave a speech that made the entire room tear up. He admitted he almost lost his son by trying so hard to protect him. And he said I had shown their family what grace looked like. Maya could have held our mistakes over us forever, he said. Instead, she chose to see us as imperfect people trying to do better. That's real character. Julian's speech was shorter, but it landed hard. He said the best thing that ever happened to him was meeting someone who saw him, not his family name or their money. And the funniest part, he added, is she had more money than all of us and didn't say a word. The room laughed and he continued, Maya taught me that love isn't about what you have, it's about who you are and how you show up for one another. Now 2 years into marriage we found our rhythm. Julian's business is thriving. My latest venture is growing quickly. We split our time between the penthouse and the beach house. His family is different now, still wealthy, still occasionally unaware of their privilege, but actively working on it. They go to therapy. They volunteer. They give back. Evelyn works with women rebuilding their lives. Thomas funds scholarships for first-generation students. Natalie does legal work for families caught in predatory lending. Evan is studying to become a social worker. And sometimes I think back to that first dinner in the rental house. How hurt and insulted I felt. How betrayed I thought I was. But now I see it differently. That test revealed who Julian was under pressure. It revealed who his family could become when challenged. And it revealed who I was when I had to choose between revenge and compassion. The money never mattered. What mattered was finding someone who loved me for me, and building a life rooted in respect, trust, and real love. Everything else was just background noise.